I think this is ridiculous, the judge said. I think referring to the prosecution in this case as a six-pack of white women is outrageous. This would not be tolerated in any court from any lawyer anywhere across the nation. He says, you have one more listener for your podcast, he added. The judge is going to be listening into. As long as you subscribe, he said, I'm all for it. Diddy has a problem, and his lawyer, someone close to his defense team, says it's a six-pack of white women. Oh, no. Now, Geragos is not officially on the defense team, but we know he was in court. We know he was talking with the other defense attorneys. And Geragos has really been the guy who's playing media point, right? He's not a part of the defense team. He's just running the camera game and sharing this out in the court of public opinion. But the judge was not happy about this, saying Geragos calls the prosecutors a six-pack of white women. Wow. So the race game is going to come out in full swing here. It's going to be a lot. Now, the judge was not happy about this. Says Arun Subramanian says he called the remarks outrageous, and we know where this is going. So Geragos, not officially on the team, but he was on with Two Angry Men, and he co-hosted it with TMZ founder called Mark Levin. Now, on Tuesday, the judge told Geragos, we're still selecting a jury, that he would be listening and watching him in their chambers to make sure you don't say anything that's going to interfere with this trial. He said, I think this is ridiculous, the judge said. I think referring to the prosecution in this case as a six-pack of white women is outrageous. This would not be tolerated in any court from any lawyer anywhere across the nation. He says, you have one more listener for your podcast, he added. The judge is going to be listening into. As long as you subscribe, he said, I'm all for it. Geragos' daughter, Tenny, is on Combs' legal team and has been a guest on the podcast, so he doesn't care, okay? Geragos has offered his opinion on a variety of topics. Prosecutors have said the video of Combs is going to be introduced. There was a request to withhold the video as evidence in the trial, but the judge denied that, of course. Now, Geragos defended his statements. He says, Your Honor, I think when you've got a black man who's being prosecuted and the client feels like he's being targeted, it's just an observation. They are white women, and there are six of them, so it's just like a six-pack. The prosecution asked the judge in a letter that we read yesterday to get this guy in control, and Assistant Attorney Christy Slavic, a member of the six-woman prosecution team, outlined those concerns. He said that they're hopeful to have a seat of 12 jurors, 6 alternates by today, Wednesday, and we're coming back on Friday. They got very close. We'll hit the peremptories and then, of course, come back to see what our jury ultimately looks like. But here is what happened. Jury selection, day 3 in the Diddy trial, brought to us courtesy of Matthew Russell Lee reporting Inner City Press over on X at Inner City Press. He says we're here, day 3 jury selection, and the peremptory challenges, right? So the strikes of the jurors, those are going to be pushed to Friday, and so we'll get things settled later on in the week. But as it stands, we're waiting for the court to get on session and get underway. Suddenly the door bursts open. Judge walks in. All rise. We all stand up. Judge takes the bench. Please be seated. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. It's Wednesday. Where were we yesterday? Hopefully the jurors listened to my instructions not to hear about the Newsman case. Okay, so where are we? Maureen Comey, what do we want? Good morning, Your Honor. We propose that we do the peremptory challenges, not today, but on Friday morning, in case some of the jurors come up with new reasons why they're not going to be on the jury before then. The judge says, yeah, that probably makes sense. Don't want to give him too much time to think about it. Anything else before we bring him in? Defense attorney Combs says, we want HBO juror 29 out, Your Honor. We're not going to use a peremptory on him, but we think he should be struck. Tenny Geragos of our team was on emails with the production company of the HBO documentary, and we know that people were paid. One of our lawyers was sending emails back and forth with HBO. Judge says, well, will the documentary even come up at trial? Like, is it going to be relevant? I believe it will. Government. Judge says to the prosecutor, well, we didn't ask her about her pay. We didn't ask her, that juror, about that. What do you think? Shouldn't we exclude her? Comey's talking with the rest of the prosecutors. Okay, Judge, we agree. Judge says, okay, fine. Juror 29 is excused for cause. All right, thank you, Judge. Defense, Your Honor, also, we looked it over yesterday. We also think the juror who works for Her Justice, we saw that's like a women's legal aid society, which we know is going to be for domestic violence and related items, says, well, she was before that legal aid society for juveniles in family court. She did not disclose that on question 14. She should have put that on there. She didn't tell us. She also didn't disclose any legal training, saying I was an intern at legal aid, and I know the office managers there have a lot of input. Judge says, okay, well, are you saying the juror lied on her form? Well, I think she lied in the individual questioning, not in the group questioning. Well, maybe she didn't get training in the law there. That's why she didn't say that. She was just like an intern or something, just working there. Well, based on my experience, Your Honor, as an intern there for 3 months, I think she did. Okay, like I was there, I was an intern there. They got training, so that's what they did. Well, when did the defense become aware of this? Yesterday. Prosecutor says, Your Honor, she's an office manager. Office managers don't get legal training, and that depends. I ran my legal office, so, I know how that goes. So anyways, I find no reason to think she lied. Now, maybe the defense just doesn't like her prior employment at that law firm, but that's why you have peremptories. So we're not going to get rid of her. She stays. And anything else? No, nothing further. All right. So bring in the jurors, please. All rise. We are now seated. The jurors are now in the courtroom. Judge announces and calls the case. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the case of the United States versus Sean Combs. I expect this case to run 8 weeks. Now, the way this is going to happen, just like we saw in days 1 and 2, which we covered here, is we're going to ask you a series of questions and we're going to move you into a different room. We're going to do group questions and individual questions. You're going to look at a binder. If you recognize anybody in the binder, then just let us know. We'll ask you some follow-up questions. This is a sex case, so if there's anything problematic in there, ask to come up and talk to us off the record, all the things. All right, you're excused. They bring him next door. All right, so we're going to begin here with juror 146. We're going to bring them in here. But first, before we get into that, judge says, Miss Geragos for the defense, how long was juror 131 working at legal aid? Defense says 3 years, Your Honor. Now, Miss Comey implied she worked on office supplies, but, I got to say, I think it's more than that. She wasn't just like refilling the copy paper. Judge says, all right, well, she was an office manager. There might be some, I'll think about it. Also, her justice also provides legal services, Your Honor. She disclosed it, so I think she's safe. Okay. All right, bring in 147. 146 comes in. He's a male. Welcome, sir. Says you had a family vacation on here, but you're back. All right, look at the binder. You recognize anybody in there? No. All right, anybody have any objections? No. Okay, he's on. Juror 220 comes in. Hi, welcome. She said, well, my mom's a Bronx guidance counselor, and my father was a substance abuse counselor. Now he works for a company that sells cannabis. Well, what's the name of the company? She says cannabis. She says, okay. And my stepfather was a New York State parole officer. Your Honor, could you ask her about question 31? She says, oh yeah, we're alumni of the same high school. Went to Mount St. Michael's, you just know. Defense, Your Honor, may we approach on this? They walk up to the judge's bench. They come back. Judge asks her a question. Do you remember retweeting a meme about Mr. Combs? Defense did their due diligence. They combed her social media. Most likely. It was a picture. Do you remember what you reposted? No. Well, why didn't you mention it in your questionnaire? So I don't know. I was just doom scrolling. Doom scrolling, says the judge. The hell's that? Moving around the internet, questioning my existence and the future of humanity for hours on end. Doom scrolling. Okay. Well, I don't know what that is. All right. Thanks for being here. All right. He leaves. He's in the pool. Next question. Juror comes in. Yeah, I work at Acme Supermarkets, which is a thing. This guy Bugs Bunny. You didn't answer if you could discuss matters of a sexual nature with fellow jurors. He just sits there in silence. Sir, I said you didn't answer whether you could discuss matters of a sexual nature with fellow jurors. Okay, you're excused. Thanks for coming in today, sir. Thank you. You're out. Now, next, 224. A relative, Your Honor. Yeah, a relative of mine works security. He worked in buildings. Like what, banks or like parking garages? No, neither of those. Prosecutor asks, could you ask if this person has seen news about the case? Juror says, well, I heard he was accused of trafficking. That's about it. Mr. Geragos, any questions? No. All right. In the pool. Next juror comes in, female. Your Honor, this would be hard for me. I have to pick my daughter up from school every day. You don't have anybody else that can pick your daughter up? No. All right, you're excused. 263 comes in. Yeah, Your Honor, my family's in the security alarm business. We deal with law enforcement and messy situations. You identify with law enforcement? Yeah. All right, you're excused. 268, 275 are not here. They didn't show up. Okay, 279 comes in. She's a woman. Well, I have a close friend whose son works at 300 Records, which is a rap and hip hop label seen there, but I didn't see him on this list, so. And I have another friend, has a son who's in country music down in Nashville called Aiden Canfield. She's excused, but she was plugging all her friends. Okay. Clerk says, all right, judge, to clarify, the jurors who were not here were told not to come by agreement of the parties, so they didn't show up without cause. They just agreed. Next juror comes in. All right, ma'am, tell us about you. Yeah, hi, I'm a teacher, middle school. I work at Manhattan School for Children. Yeah, I saw the footage from the hotel, and I said he would be guilty, but, I'm from the South. Well, I was told how you can catch a case and everyone turns against you. I can be fair, she says. She's in the pool. Next juror is a female. Says, I work at the Bronx Arts and Science Charter School. I take trainings, and I seen the Cassie video on the internet, but did he do it? I don't know. I have 2 daughters, so you have a bias, you think? Yeah, excused. Female. Yeah, Your Honor, I don't do social media. I never talked about these issues with strangers, but I think I could. She's in. 295 is another woman. Answered on the questionnaire about a personal history. Can you answer much here? Well, it depends how much you want to know. Well, I'm going to ask about what happened. She says, well, I better come up and talk to you then. They go up, talks, comes back. Says, my parents are doctors. I went to law school. Do you practice? Well, for my husband's financial services firm. My brother-in-law, who was in Russia, was mugged. He was beaten and hospitalized. And I think my brother had a desk appearance ticket for marijuana. I had a grandfather investigated for organized organized crime in the Bronx? Do you have any insight into racketeering? No. Defense says, Your Honor, can you ask about 26? Yeah, sure. You saw the video? I did. But I still think I can be fair. As an attorney, I feel a deep ethical duty to do that. Wow, that's beautiful. She's in the pool. Juror 300 comes in. Your Honor, it's going to be hard for me to be impartial here. He's out. 303. I worked at Sarah Rita's, guarding the New York Historical Museum. Now, about that company, Sarah Rita's, you have any positive or negative feelings? Negative feelings. My supervisor thought men were gods and women were peasants. Also, my brother was convicted of guns. And I have a negative view of law enforcement. So you're excused. Okay, bye. Thanks for being so honest. Well, I'll bring him next one. 307. Oh, yeah, I've heard about the case. Where'd you hear about it? From you, Your Honor. He's like, yeah, good answer. Clever. Okay, she's in the pool. 316 is a male. He comes in. Your Honor, I feel like I should not be in the jury for this guy. Why? Well, I don't know. I don't have anything against him. So you think you should be on or not be on? He says, he's looking at Diddy, like, I don't know. All right, you're excused. Get out of here. Another male comes in, and Judge Submaranian laughs at him. He says, hello, sir. And how do you know the judge? He says, we did antitrust class actions together. I also knew former U.S. Attorney Berman. So how do you know the judge? Like they know each other. Do you know anyone on this list? Yeah, I may have worked for Diageo. And I've had jury trials, and I believe in paying it back. A longtime client in a singular industry will require counseling in regular hours in the next few weeks. It would be difficult for them. He says, yeah, I know. You work around the clock. You work hard. He says, I was up last night, and I'm supposed to testify before the Judiciary Committee. But I think that they would understand if I was here. Defense, Your Honor, I have a question for this dude. Passes it forward. Judge says, is your client going to be ill-served, or is the relationship going to be impaired if you're on this trial? It may be, Your Honor. It's a transaction case. He leaves. Government says, Your Honor, he seems unbiased, but they might have an outsized influence on other jurors. Like, so some kind of heavy hitter came in there. Like he's going in front of the Judiciary Committee, big name. He might have an outsized influence on other jurors. Everyone's going to be paying attention to that guy. Defense says, well, I have no issue with his relationship with the court, but I'm concerned about his clients. So that guy is also excluded. And it sounds like that is the day from Inner City Press. So we get an abrupt stop from him, and he explains that jury selection is going to continue May 9th on Friday, and will, of course, be back for that. And so once again, thank you to Inner City Press for giving us the deets on the jury selection. We've got a big enough pool, so they'll issue their peremptories, and then we'll whittle it down on Friday. And then on Monday, we'll be back with opening arguments, and it should be good. We'll see what Diddy has to say after that six-pack of white women starts with their opening statements. We'll be here to cover it. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do.